I am streaming live. I'm going to go turn on the Facebook in a second here when it catches up with the stream. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I see you over in the Discord chat. And this time, we appear to be streaming on Facebook. I know I said we were last week, but I don't think it ever connected. But now we are. Excellent. So I'm going to hide that. And yeah, I got confirmation that Twitch just went live. So hello, everybody. I'm John Park, and this is my workshop. I am streaming live to you today on October 19th for Adafruit Industries. And here we are. I've got a fairly eclectic assortment of things going on today in the workshop. So first of all, I want to encourage anyone who is tuning in on Twitch or YouTube to head over to, or Facebook, the Discord chat. And if you check out, what's the best way for you to find out where that is? I think discord.something/Adafruit. Is that right? I'm going to check that out. Someone tell me in the Discord chat what the heck our channel is, but I'm going to try it out right here. Discord. Oh, discordapp.com. That's not it. /Adafruit. I'm making things up now. Let's see if that works. Not at all. All right, I'm going to grab it out of my own blog post. So stand by. If you check the Twitter, let me go over to the blog here. You will often see our announcements come through here in the form of a blog post. So right there, I don't know why I got the cat, is the link, and this says the live text chat is here in the Adafruit Discord channel. So adafru.it/discord, that'll get you there. adafru.it/discord. And thank you, Yanisku7 in the chat, for pointing that out. So check that out if you want to chat. It's the place to be. Okay, so a few things going on. First of all, I'm going to do one last demo of the little drum machine I built the other day. So let me head over to the workbench here. So what's going on here is that we have been creating a whole bunch of tutorials for working with the Circuit Playground Express. It's this little board you see here, using CircuitPython. So if you check out learn.adafruit.com, right on that front page you'll find a Circuit Playground Express guide. And on that guide, we have been working hard at writing a whole bunch of tutorials for every way you can use the board, which is in the Arduino IDE, using MakeCode, the super cool Blockly-based Microsoft Web UI, and in CircuitPython. And this is happening in real time. If you go to Discord, like I mentioned before, there's a channel for live broadcast. That's where we're chatting right now about this stuff. I see you. We also have a channel for a whole bunch of things, including CircuitPython. If you go there, you'll see the actual development. There's people right there discussing things and working on the software as we speak, probably. So we are excited to be rolling out a bunch of little mini tutorials in that guide for working with CircuitPython. That's something I've been doing a lot of lately. And we've even gone beyond most of the basics, like how to use a NeoPixel, how to light the onboard LED, how to read analog inputs, how to read the digital buttons. And we've started to move into this little section that Lamore and I are calling Playground. And so in Playground, we're going to include little things that might combine a few of those techniques that are a slightly more interesting project than just light the LED or just make the buzzer make a sound. So this project here, I'm going to switch cameras, is I'm evolving this right before your eyes. So I showed this the other day. It is the CircuitPython is the Circuit Playground Express, and I have some alligator clips and pennies connected to some of the pads. And now you can see I've also added some copper tape. That's what this stuff is here. I've got a couple of different sizes of this conductive copper tape that also has conductive adhesive on it, and you can use it to make connections. In this case, I'm using it for some of the inputs for the drum pad that I've built. So what I'm going to do is turn on this little amplifier. This is a little guitar amp. My son's guitar teacher, Andrew, gave this to him the other day, which was super cool. And now I've immediately co-opted it, so sorry. But it's getting good use. So what I have is outputs from the A0 pin on the Circuit Playground Express and ground going to the 1/4 inch plug here. And that's going into the 1/4 inch jack on the amp. Let me turn the volume up a bit. And so what I was showing the other day is I'm able to trigger, let me turn this up. I'm able to trigger wave files. So these are little sound samples that are on the board, and any of the 7 analog input pads that can be used for capacitive touch are being called to trigger different sound effects that I have on there. So I have this little cymbal sound. Oh, that one's not working. Let's see. I think I've done it now. So what I'm going to do, let's see if this works. I'm going to reset the board. Sometimes capacitive sense it calibrates when the Circuit Playground Express starts up, and sometimes that stuff can drift. So now it's working. So I have kind of a snare and a kick. So this arrangement is a little bit more familiar to people who've used drum machines like the Roland 808 and 909 that this was sort of based on. So I've left some of these as the pennies, and it's not working perfectly yet. I think my connections aren't so great on those pads for some of them, so you'll see that one that I just restarted, that one's not working. That one's the cowbell. The cowbell always works. That one won't. That one is. That's kind of like a little bass hit. So I explained that on Show and Tell yesterday, a little bit about this. You can go to the playground section of the Circuit Playground Express guide on Learn and find out more about it, download the code, build your own. And there's a lot of different ways you could trigger this, but I wanted to show one that was a little different than just the straight alligator clips and pennies. So that's what that is. So let's see, any questions in the chat, let me know. It's a fairly straightforward project, but pretty fun, and you can put any sound effect you want on there. It doesn't just have to be these. I've included these in a zip file that you can download if you head to the Learn guide, but I've also got a link there to a guide that Lady Ada wrote on converting your files to the proper type of wave. It's like a 16-bit 22 kilohertz or lower sample rate PCM wave file. That's one that plays very quickly off of the board. It's a raw file, I guess, in a sense. There's not a sort of a decompression step like with the OGG files or some of the other files that you can put on there that are going to be smaller. But you can get them down pretty tiny, and I make these mono as well since we're going out of a single speaker. But pretty cool project. Another thing I'll mention along the way, I was introduced, again by Lamore, to a program called Sonic Pi, SONIC-PI, I think is the website, sonicpi.com. It is awesome. It's a sort of a programming environment for making sound. So you can use this sort of scripting language that looks a bit like Python to create really elaborate soundscapes and sound beds and songs. Really cool, and all the samples for it are open source, public domain samples. So I actually pulled, I think, all of these drum sounds that I have here from ones that were available within that program. So Sonic Pi, check it out, super fun. You will lose yourself for hours once you check it out. It's got great tutorials, and it gets you up and running quickly on using very small little snippets of code to do things like create drum beats and to create effects on top of your sounds, to generate wave sounds like sine waves and sawtooths and other synthesizer type patterns, as well as triggering samples. So I was really excited to play around with that, and I look forward to doing it more. So that is what I want to show you on that. Let me know if there's any other questions about that. Yeah, you could use screams and yells and boos as well for Halloween. So I've got all those sounds that I pulled for the Screaming Cauldron project a couple weeks ago. It'd be fun to put them on here. And just because Eric asks, more cowbell. All right. So let me set this off to the side. And then I have a couple of other little things I wanted to show you. So one of them, I'm going to do a little bit of setup here. I should have had this set up before, but I'm going to make my little flying saucer here fly. So let me connect that up. All right, so we have a flying saucer. This is it. This flying saucer, as you can see, has some little creepy UFO style lights underneath it. And the reason I put this project together was to look at how the accelerometer on the Circuit Playground Express can be used for an input. So what you'll notice is when I turn this right side up, it turns off. It stops the pattern. And so it's not fully off. The Circuit Playground still has power, but it's not draining the battery by running. So this is sort of using the accelerometer as an off switch. And then when you set it, anything that heads beyond sort of 90 degrees straight up and down like this on the z-axis, we get a light pattern. Now the light pattern is also based on the accelerometer. So you can see I've got a magenta here right now at this angle, and as I orient it differently, I'm heading towards a teal, green, full green, a white, a yellow, orange, and back through to the magenta. So the idea behind this, again, Lauren and I were having a conversation, and she said, I have this idea of doing like a really cheesy kind of UFO like you'd see in was it Plan 9 from Outer Space by the director Ed Wood. Is pretty famous for having this really cheesy looking UFO in it that's just hanging from a string really close to the camera in a bunch of scenes. So there have been rumors for a long time that the UFO in that movie was made from hubcaps or made from pie plates. I looked it up, and it turns out it was actually made from a little model kit that you could buy at the store. The company that made it is out of business, but the patterns have been sold a couple of times to different companies. I think the company Atlantis now actually still makes this exact UFO model. I couldn't get one in time, but that'll never stop us, right? I decided to 3D model one, not exactly like the Ed Wood one, but pretty similar, based on some reference I got of images of different UFOs online. So I 3D modeled it, and then I printed it. And that was a whole journey in and of itself. Let me switch cameras and go over here and show you some fun issues I had with printing. So this was the first iteration. Let's see, I go to the screen for a second. It's a little bigger. So that was my first iteration of the UFO. You can see I lost adhesion to the platform, and I got this kind of bird's nest thing. Then I had a little bit better adhesion. This thing stayed put, but the amount of overhang that I required from layer to layer was actually, I think, a little wide, maybe a little wider than the nozzle width. So everything kind of drooped, and I ended up with this fun thing. So then I do what most of us do when we have a problem with our 3D prints. We talk to an expert. So I talked to Noe and Pedro, the Ruiz brothers, and they gave me a couple of suggestions. One was to maybe use support material under it, so we would be building up in the hollow section from the bed, so the layers would have something to rest on. The other one was to print it vertically. This one actually warped a little bit. This one I just did is a bit better, and one of the halves of that one that I have flying over there in the background came out perfectly. So this is half, obviously, of my half, so it's a quarter of a UFO. I printed it like this, and then the second half. Whoa, my drum machine is going off. Let me unplug that. Oh yeah, did I mention the drum machine also works with just the onboard speaker, so you don't need to be plugged into an amp, so that's why that was making noise. So the idea is I'll fit these two sides together and rotate them, I think 45 or 33 degrees off from the two halves I do on the bottom, and I have little screw holes that I'll use to connect those. So actually, while I've got this closer up camera, let me pull down my ceiling mounted magnet one, and I can show you this up close. So here you can see I've got one half. That's the half that printed really beautifully, actually. And I have little nylon 2.5mm screws and hex nuts holding that together. So actually this bottom was not too bad. Maybe I'll go with that bottom and this nicer top, and then I won't have as many separate pieces. And I've got I made some little notches in here so I could plug in my USB and power. There's just a little battery inside of there that I've taped down. So that's what the model looks like, and I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the model as I built it. So let me switch to this camera over here. And I'll pull up the model here as I built it. And let me move the chat down here so I can see your questions if you have any. So this is the two halves of the model, as well as a model I built a little while ago of a circuit playground so that I would have it for reference. It's actually the original circuit playground and not the Express, but it's the same size, so it works well enough for this. So I'm going to open up. I don't have a lot of room on this screen, so I'll detach this. Windows is usually something I store off to the side. And let me show you some of the parts of building this. So this is Rhino that I'm using. This would be a really good Fusion 360 project. I keep saying that. I've used Fusion a little bit for some things, but I am so familiar with Rhino that when I'm in a hurry, I go to the familiar thing and work inside of Rhino. So Rhino is a NURBS modeling program, and I'm going to turn off the circuit playground here. Let me turn, well, you can see here, this is that one of the final ones I used? I didn't organize this very well either. Sorry for that. All right, so this is one of the profiles I built, as well as a little stand-in for the circuit playground. And the way I built this, so I'll give you an idea. What you do with these kinds of curves generally is revolve them. So you spin them around sort of like a piece of pottery. So if we go back to a perspective view, you can see if I select this, and I'm just going to type in commands, because I tend to do that with Rhino rather than going to the menus, but you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to say revolve, and it's going to ask me where's the start of the revolve axis. So I'm essentially picking 2 points that run vertically through, and you can see it just swept this thing around to create the base shape. And so then I did the same for the bottom, and to create the details of little greebles and windows and things like that, as they're called for these kind of models. You just want something that has some sort of an interest in them. UFOs tend to be really depicted as simple with just a few design details on them. So there's a few ways you can do this sort of thing. One thing I did was, go to a top view here and I'll shade this for you. You can create some shapes and project them kind of like a film projector or a light onto the surface so that they would then conform to the surface, and then use them to carve pieces out. So I'll show you an example of that. So from this top view here, let's just make a little, turn on grid snapping. So just make a nice simple shape. And then I'm going to mirror this to make it symmetrical. And I'll join those two halves. Okay, so shape like this, let's just run it maybe around the perimeter. So what I'll do is, it might be good to, let's see, yeah, I'll go ahead and project it, and then, do I want to do that? No, yeah, I do it. I'm going to project it, do some stuff to it, and then array it around this thing. So let's do the projection first. So I'm going to type in project. And it wants me to say, what surface are you throwing that onto? I'll say this one. Boom, it did it. And if I'm going to switch this view here to a shaded view so you can see a little better. So what happened there is it took the one I drew originally, and that's the one living here down on the construction plane, and then it splatted a copy of it onto the top and the underside. So I'll get rid of that underside one. And then this top one, what I'll do is I'm going to run a command that'll just give this some thickness. So this is just a curve right now. It's essentially a zero volume curve. It doesn't have any model representation. So I'm going to use a pipe command in here and make myself a little, oop, I'm snapping to things. Let me turn that off. There we go. So I'm going to make a little, whoops, why did that happen? You can see what I'm trying to do is run a little circle around, whoops, this guy. A curve, pipe, closed pipe. There we go. I don't know what happened the first time. So that is, now you can see it's not flat like the original. It's actually conformed to the surface here. I'm going to take this thing now and I'm going to rotate it around. So I'll turn back on some of my snapping. And I'm going to allow it only to snap to the center of things, so that'll make it easy for me to find the middle point of this thing. And so this is a polar array. I think it's called array polar. So it wants to know what's the beginning point. So I'm going to say just the center of any circle that's involved here. How many we want? Let's say we want 12. 360 degrees is great. So now I end up with 11 new ones. So that's the 12 that I specified. I'll say done. Okay, so those you could merge into the model at this point, or you could use to carve away from the model with a Boolean. And that's what I did on this one here. You can see, whoops, my fishing line is snagging. So that's what these little shapes are here, these sort of weird alien A shapes. A for alien, right? That's how that stuff was created. So there's not too much more to it than that, other than one helpful tip I have is for creating the holes for the screws. I actually have a little model file that I can re-import all the time, which is a cylinder that's the size of a little larger than a 2.5 millimeter screw for those screw holes to go. 'Cause 3D prints tend to shrink in a little bit, so I want some space for that. And a hexagon extruded that's the right dimensions for the nut. I think it's about 5 millimeters that goes on those, and a little recess for the head. So I can bring those in and Boolean or cut them out of the model, which is how I ended up with, let me hide this. I'm going to delete this stuff I just made, goodbye stuff I just made, and show the top again. So you can see here I have, that's the right dimensions for my 2.5 millimeter nylon screws and their screw head. And if I turn on the bottom, you can see that has that little hex. This is a pretty thin model, so it doesn't go in it very deeply and hide it like a recessed thing typically would. The nut is bigger, but you can see the screw head is pretty flush. It's just popping up a little bit. And it's those little details that are really important when you're trying to 3D print stuff that you want to put together, but can be annoying to go, oh God, do I now need to go out and measure some stuff? So what I do is create those little Booleaning or carving out objects and save them as a separate file so I can just import them in and repeat this. So that's a little bit on building the UFO. Now the UFO code, Hide this and bring back the chat. Hey chat, there you are. So the code that I have running on here, it's currently some of our newer, not out yet, Circuit Playground, Circuit Python rather. It's the Express Pi and Express MPy that are libraries that kind of roll up a whole bunch of different functions that we normally would have as separate libraries for the Playground, Circuit Playground Express. So Circuit Playground Express, if you remember in Arduino under the original Circuit Playground Classic, you could query buttons on it with the name button A rather than saying on pin 8 where, or that's not the right one, but where the button lives. So it simplifies, gives you kind of a higher level set of commands to code that Circuit Playground Classic in Arduino. And we're doing the same thing right now for Circuit Playground Express so that you'll be able to more simply say, I'm going to talk about this Circuit Playground Express by calling it CPX. And CPX dot acceleration, accelerometer, what are you up to? CPX dot button A, what are you up to? So that's some really nice stuff that'll make it easier for people getting into this stuff. Right now I don't have all of the sound playback code working in there, or I should say rather the developers who you'll find over on the Discord chat for Circuit Python. It's not quite there, or maybe it is, I haven't checked in a couple hours, and that's how quickly this stuff's being developed. But when that does work, I'm going to have sound effects. So there's a UFO sound file I have on here that I want to trigger whenever we are showing the colored lights. And so look for that. I'm going to make a little standalone guide, I think, for this one, a little bigger than just a playground example. That will be, I'll include the 3D models on there. And I will also probably give you a, let me switch cameras here. I say that, but I'm not clicked on the right thing. I will also include a paper plate based version of this. So I think you could do with paper plates and little disposable coffee, instant UFO. Might tape it together, trim it, paint it, but you can get a nice little UFO that you can hang and maybe even diffuse the lights through the bottom here or drop it out with a cup. Here's instant tractor beam. This might be a kind of a cool display actually if you want it to look like it is. Gosh, do I have any little action figures in here? Who could it be? Okay, here's Tinkerbell. So she's a little large for this, but aliens don't care. So you could have maybe with a more appropriately sized, how about that, huh? You could have your UFO picking up poor Tinkerbell. That's a tiny UFO because Tinkerbell stands about 5 inches tall in the real film units. So that's the UFO. Any questions or comments you have on that, I'd love to hear them. And look for that guide to come out sometime next week, I think. I'll be putting out the UFO guide. Yeah, Northern Pike, thank you. It is a cheap, neat way to do your tractor beam. It's just with a plastic cup. You might also, let me go off script a little bit here. You might also be able to do something interesting with, let me see if I can hold it so you don't see so many reflections. But you can see the lights there are actually being reflected. There, you see that? Sorry, not in the small camera, but in the big camera. All right, let me switch over to the little camera, actually. So you get kind of a cool effect just by internal reflections of that. And if you scratched up the inside of this, you might get more, a little diffusion. Let's try that, actually. I'm kind of curious. I want to hold this. Let me get out a little clamp to hold this for a second. And it might make a kind of neat little desk display or something to have your tractor beam and your abductee of choice. Who do the aliens want this time? And let me crank this in a whole bunch. use a little magnet. So that's the basic effect. Now let's see if we grab a, I don't know if this will work or not, but let's find out. I'm going to grab some sandpaper. Probably some fine, fairly fine stuff. Let's see, I've got these. This might be too fine, but let's try them. I like these little sponge. This is a 400 grit. This is 1500. These are super fine stuff. This one I forget what it is. I've lost the, it's about the same as this. So let's go in there and scratch things up a bit. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I like that. So I might add that. I might just use this cup. That's going to be a lot quicker and easier than 3D printing something clear like that. And it'll never be that clear to begin with or smooth to begin with, unless maybe on a resin printer. But that cup probably cost 10 cents in a bulk pack. You might also protect some of the lower part of it before you start scratching it away, or just get a smaller piece of sandpaper up in there so you get a clear part down here so you can see who's being abducted. Sorry, Tinkerbell. It is nothing personal. Oh, you can still see here. Yeah, that's kind of cool. So, if that's not among the weirder things that you experienced today, good for you. But if it is the weirdest thing you experienced today, I'm very happy about that. So there we have combining of higher tech 3D printing and super low tech, use plastic cup. I'm very happy about that. That looks cool. So let's see. We have about a half hour here. So what I wanted to, oh yeah, someone said that the overhead fluorescents are reflecting off the side of the glass, looking like beams. Much better. Oh, Yanisku wants touchpads that make sound in the UFO and tractor beams with sound. Yeah, totally. Like if you start combining the last 2-3 projects that I've been doing here, they all make a big meta alien abduction project, which is pretty fun. Let's move this thing here for a second. I just want to have a nice shot of the top of our UFO. That's just fun. All right, I'm pleased with that. Let's pull this out of here and set it. Should balance. Yeah, it's pretty balanced. I don't have the full. And you can see now that I've got kind of a magenta thing going. Green. Right, so UFO stand. I think that'll be a fun addition to this project, is the UFO stand. So thank you for being on the journey with me of figuring out how to make our tractor beam. The other thing that I wanted to play around with today's a bit of a smorgasbord of projects largely related to Halloween. So here was this idea. Have you seen these things? These are pumpkins that are made of foam, kind of a closed cell hard foam, that are pretty inexpensive. I think my wife picked these up at Target. You could get them at hobby stores. And they are designed to be carved or decorated. It says on the tag here, here's the one we got. Whoops, my UFO. Watch out, little UFO. It says on the tag here, Hide and Eek Boutique. Carvable pumpkin. Decorate by carving, painting, or attaching accessories. So they want you to do fun stuff with them. So I just started playing around with these. I cut the bottom off of this one and was thinking it would be cool to light it internally, maybe with like a face or a pattern or something that can be animated. And so I took one of these little NeoPixel wings, a little feather wing, and watch out, this is going to be bright. And so I I made a little pattern of a kind of a jack-o'-lantern eye, and I put a sort of random blink pattern on there so that it looks like it's winking its eye every once in a while. So the idea would be maybe use a couple of these and maybe one of our quarter rings, quarter circle rings that's, I forget how many neopixels are in those, like 15 or something like that, as a smile, or who knows, but you could embed these inside and maybe carve away enough foam so that we see them fairly clearly, but it still gets a little diffusion based on this outer surface that's painted, and then be able to have reactive lights. Could be you use like a motion sensor or other sensing, or just have kind of a pattern playing. You can of course add sound and have screams. So this is the beginning of an idea of doing a little bit of an update to some of the previous pumpkin scream projects we've done, or maybe just a wholly new one. So that's the idea behind it. So what I first started doing was I took this piece that I carved off the bottom, and I traced a pattern of the neopixels and started to carve away a groove so that I could see what the light pattern looks like. So you can see I've got this sort of triangle here of the eye, and I imagine it'll show up pretty nicely at night. It's still not super sharp definition, so that might be something to play around with, putting some little blockers in so that we don't have as much light leakage, or maybe carve it closer to the surface. So I thought it might be fun to hack open one of these pumpkins and try setting it inside as an eye. So that was my idea. CG Rover says a real pumpkin naturally gets scarier over time. Yanisku with a laser cutter, let's see, yeah, laser cutter. Northern Pike says, a synthetic carving pumpkin, are we in the 21st century or what? Yeah, I know. If you've been to some of the really big displays of beautifully artistically carved pumpkins, they have them at like different farms and botanical gardens I've been to. Apparently this is more and more what they're using, just because it's meant to be an artistic expression of cool pumpkin carving, and not so much about preserving pumpkins for 4 weeks or something. Especially here in Southern California, it's not that cold right now, so pumpkins don't survive. So let's have a look. I'm going to unplug this thing because it's killer bright. And I'm going to leave this guy alone. I don't know what we'll do with that one, but I have a bigger one here, and I think I'll saw it open. How about this one? And see how we do carving away a nice little section to embed the electronics. So I'll try to lift this camera up. Let me switch here for a second. So I'm going to lift this camera up a little bit in its stand so that we are further away. And tilt that a little bit. All right. Let's move our UFO over to the side. Don't forget your paper plates for your own UFO. And I'm not sure what the ideal tool is for cutting this open. I think what I'll do is maybe, I'm tempted to kind of just cut it in half so I can get at it and then stick it back together with some glue or something later. And I could do the sort of traditional top. Let's do that. Let's start off with cutting out a top from it, see if that's enough room, but then I may just cut it a large hole out of the back or cut it in half. So these are pretty cheap too, I think, so don't be shy about trying stuff out. I'm going to make a mess here probably, but let's see if this little saw, actually I'll start out maybe with this knife here to get my, it's kind of cool. They're using this whitish, off-white foam to cast this and then painting it orange so you get that natural, I'll switch cameras for you. You get that natural effect of the pumpkin's orange outer skin. This is not a very sharp X-Acto. Let me get either a new blade or a sharper one. I have a big box of blades that I have misplaced. So let's see. Here's a couple of different ones. Let's see if any of them are sharp. That's better. I would use like a Dremel or something, but that's a sure way to make a lot of dust, is to spin this stuff up. I wouldn't be surprised if at this point there's like a little Dremel version of a Sawzall, reciprocating saw. That would be pretty cool. Does anyone know if that exists? I like little miniature versions of real tools. That'd be fun. And I'm going in at the a little bit of an angle instead of straight up and down, and that'll allow this top to rest back inside of there, hopefully, without falling through. I'm sure most people are familiar with that technique on real pumpkins. If you cut it straight up and down, then the lid drops in and smothers your candle. These are cool. You know, you could do any kind of LED projects with these, from just like a little simple flickering LED instead of a candle, carve it traditionally, and just have a fully synthetic Halloween. But I think this will be a pretty cool use. There we go. So, voila, we're inside. Fairly realistic. So let's see. I'm going to use this as the front, and if I'm trying to get an eye in there, I'm worried I won't be able to really carve that well. And you can see if I plug this in, it doesn't really show up, especially the pattern. It'll show up as some light, but it really doesn't show up that well as the pattern when it's sitting that far away. And that's a pretty bright light. So I think we need to remove some foam. And I'm kind of dying to just cut this thing in half, so let's do that. Anything I should think about? I don't think so. I think I just go for it. Maybe a little past the... This is a pretty dull blade, and it is lifting up some of the paint, I think. Maybe I won't use this. Let's get this box cutter. Oh, I'm out of camera. Let me move this into the camera. I'm just going to set some of these blades over here so that if I slip, I don't go slamming into the... See that? Sorry. I don't know if any of the traditional pumpkin carving tools would work that well on this, or what the ideal is, but this box cutter's all right. Almost there. My thumb is not in the way in there, I promise. There we go. This would actually be kind of a cool thing to maybe turn into a face mask of some kind. Kind of pumpkin head thing. I have a bigger one here. That might be fun. Cut that, put it around your neck. Terrifying. It's fairly light too. Yeah, a little bit hot in there, but I'm excited about some of the possibilities with these things. Speaking of masks, by the way, we have 15 minutes. I don't have enough time to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I found some old masks that I had made for Halloween a few years ago. This is a 3D printed polygon man that someone on Thingiverse made. It's a super cool model. I just modified it to remove some ear temples. They had like glasses on there, and put in my own little elastic. And then I painstakingly cut some very thin pieces of blue tape to put across all the edges, which gives it this kind of neat faceted polygon look. That's a fun one. And then, a couple years ago, I bought on Etsy. Someone had made a pretty nice sculpt and pulled some vinyl with a vacuform into this Monopoly Man from Mr. Robot, and I just painted it. Came black. So that was my Mr. Robot mask. And then this year, I just got in the mail from the marketing department at whoever his production company is for Mr. Robot. They sent these. These are pretty fun. Little mask. It's quite a bit. They're fairly similar, but a bit smaller for this one. So anyway, I'm well set on masks. And what are you guys going for Halloween? Does anyone know yet? A hot knife, a hot wire knife. That's a good question. CG Rover, scribe with knife, flayed, cut with saw. You've done a lot of foam cutting. Oh yeah, that's great. No, I'm glad to hear any foam cutting tips. Get yourself some of these and play around with them, CG Rover, and let us know what works well. So for carving, what tips do you have? I just want to thin out. You can see what I did. I've lost that little piece. You can see what I did here. I just kind of scored it and then went in with a chisel, but that was easier on this one because it was small. So if I want to essentially scoop out that shape from there, what do you recommend? I'm gonna wait for your recommendations a little bit in the chat. I'm also gonna go ahead and mark this with a pen. Why do I never have a thin Sharpie? Here's a thin Sharpie. All right, let's see. How's this one working? Good enough. So I'll set that right there. And I'm just going to try to get that into the camera, sorry. Very roughly mark it, but you can see it's going to be a pain in the neck. I guess it should be coming in from the top here where there's more of a hole. Well, that helps. So I want to thin that out, but I want to avoid poking all the way through if I can. A Stanley Surefoam tool. Surefoam. I'm going to go in with this little scribe. Let's see if that gives me a nice guide to work with so that a knife stays put. A knife might work better, but this is kind of convenient to grip this way because you can hold it like a pen. And it's not very sharp, so the point is a little dull on this scribe, but that might mean I don't poke through to the other side. So sorry if this part of the project is not heavy on electronics for those tuning in thinking we might, but it was very straightforward to put this together. It was literally just soldering on header pins on I used a Feather M0. I can't find my Feather M0 Express. I can't remember if that's living in a project right now. I need to get another one because I think it would be fun to, you guessed it, program it in CircuitPython. I haven't used CircuitPython on that little feather wing, but that feather wing just shows up as a strip of 32 neopixels, so you can address it like any kind of neopixels, but it's good to go. There's no capacitor for you to put, no resistor for you to put. It's all ready to go. Okay, so I've got an outline on there. Hand drill a large flat bit, wrap a piece of electrical tape on a bit to mark the depth. Oh yeah, you could kind of route it out. Yeah, I do have a router bit for my Dremel. That might be a way to just kind of hand carve that. Let's see. I don't know what the battery life is looking like on this Dremel, but let's see how that works. I know I said I didn't want to spread foam everywhere, but all right, that battery is semi-active. And where, oh where, is this the router bits? No. There it is. Carving and engraving. Okay, that's not the router bits, but yeah, carving, maybe. These are a little small. But get ready for me to make a ton of dust. Let's see how this goes. Boy, these are tiny. Do I have anything bigger? Hold on. Hold on. Oh, what about you? Anyone in here? Yeah, there's a sort of engraving-y, carving-y one that's a little bigger. Whoops. Can you still hear me? Because I just almost yanked my microphone pack off. I think you can. Let's see how that thing does. It'll be a lot of back and forth. It'd be nice if I have a bigger bit, but all right, I need the tool. Or how about just some pliers? I'm going to put on some glasses so I don't get foam in my eyes. It would probably be a smart idea to wear a respirator. Let's see how terrible this is. Let me test it on something first. All right, I'll give you a close-up of... Yeah, it works well, and it definitely spreads a bunch of dust, but you know what? You gotta suffer for your art sometimes, so I will clean up later, and I am going to put on at least a mask. Let's just put on a dust mask. And I hope this isn't super toxic, Target. CG Rover, you can yell at me if you think that this is bad and dumb and I should put on a real respirator. Looking good. I don't think I'm deep enough in there. Making sure you can see. All right. Amazingly, the dust is kind of contained. It just sits right here on my hand. Let me go dust myself off outside here. It doesn't seem to have flown everywhere in the shop, at least not that I can tell, so that's good. Dentist, I am so sorry, Agent Smith. Yeah, I know some people have a really bad reaction to that drilling sound, so my wife included. She cannot take any sandpaper noises or drilling noises. So let's see. Oh, that's kind of nice. That's a pretty good fit. Let's see. Will I be able to power it? Yeah. All right. Let's try it out. I forget which is up and down. That is up. All right. So let's put a battery. Make sure it's lighting up. Yes. Set that in there. Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Hey! It is kind of blown out on that camera. Let's see if this one captures it a little more. Yeah, these are the cameras don't quite, they blow it out a lot. But it looks good. Let's see, is there a way for me to trick the camera? I saw Tony doing this thing the other day where he was trying to trick the camera by pointing another light at it, but no, that's not doing it. Let me set this here, and I'm just going to stop down the big camera. I'm going to point it at this, and I am going to adjust the aperture and shutter speed. Let's see if we can get something that conveys to you what I see here. All right. Oops, sorry. All right, let's try to... There we go. That's more like what I see here. So kind of cool, huh? I am digging these pumpkins. Yeah, okay, well, we're almost out of time, so I won't make a second one, but I think you could use a pair of feathers if you want. You could come up with a clever way to run a second of the feather wing, the NeoPixel feather wings off here. You would just need to connect the digital output from one to the digital input of the other, and then connect power and ground. But I'm pretty sure you could run a pair of these eyes, and then maybe the mouth too, using one of those little lovely little quarter circles. You know, the big circles that we have, they come in quarters that you solder together. So you might be able to do this little smile with that, or something else. But pretty cool. There's the guts for you. Let's see, let me get that out of the way. You can see there. And here's our animated face. And, you know, with the proper, let me put his put the pumpkin back together. You can see I'll need to do a little way of connecting those guys back up. Maybe something mechanical, maybe glue it. The top back on here. But it's a pretty cool look. I'm happy with that. Look at him blinking. So for the blink, it's just a random delay in the Arduino code. So I just say random parenthesis 2 comma 10,000, I think. So between a random number between 2 seconds and 10 seconds is when the blink happens. The blink is a little slow. Blinks are fast, but blinks can be just a few, I think in animation terms, just like 3 frames is the typical blink, very fast. But, you know, you could even animate it looking around, right? We have this whole grid to work with, so you could potentially do a little eye shift left and right, do shapes. So there's a lot of possibilities with these. So we'll see if I can at least get a second eye and a mouth in there, and I'll post this up as a little mini guide. But that pretty much concludes John Park's workshop for today. I'll say it in the third person, sure. And I'll thank everyone for coming by to check it out, and thank you for hanging out in the chat. Agent Smith asks, are those pumpkins safe for candles? I don't think so. I wouldn't dare put an open flame near these things. I mean, it's from Target, so probably they're trying to prevent fires just for liability reasons, but they say, let's see, it says, for indoor decorative use only, not a toy. This product is flammable. Keep away from heater flames. So yeah, I would definitely, don't do that. But I'm pretty confident that our NeoPixel LEDs are not going to set that thing on fire. Don't take me to court if you manage to set it on fire. Are there other things made of this material at the store where you got this, asks Northern Pike. I don't know, actually. My wife picked these up at Target, and I think she said she was seeing them at other craft stores as well. So you can look. I don't know what the actual name, look at that. Okay, that one's a little blown out, but it's still kind of cool looking. I don't know if CG Rover, do you know what the name of this type of foam is? Anyone? It's a closed cell foam. I am sure it has a real name that a model maker or someone who's done theatrical foam work would know. So let me know. Yeah, cool glow. I'm pleased with that glow. Let me switch. I'm going to put this back here and switch to a pair of cameras that show this off to great effect. Move this camera. Dun, dun, dun. And we can get our UFO in here. Our UFO is thinking of abducting the pumpkin. So that's how that turned out. Yeah. Foamed PVC, probably. Okay. Polyurethane. And Northern Pike, I'll bet you there's probably other props made from this stuff. It seems pretty nice to work with. I'll tell you, I was surprised that I didn't end up with dust everywhere. It really did stay pretty contained, which is huge, huge plus. And this might be a good foam to consider for tombstones too, especially if you have a CNC router. You might be able to carve out some pretty elaborate stuff for some big tombstones to put in your yard. I don't know what prep they did to paint it, but it took paint nicely. This orange paint on here holds up well. It's not rubbing off. So that is going to wrap it up for us today. So thanks again, everyone, for stopping by, and I will see you next week, possibly at a different time. I'm normally at this time, which is 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific, 20 Greenwich Mean Time /UFC. And is that UFC or UCF? I can't remember. One of those is like the Ultimate Fight Championship or something, right? Anyway, I may need to go earlier next week, so I will place a blog post up on next Tuesday letting you know what time the show will be. And please send me any suggestions, thoughts. I'll be in the chat. I'll see you on Discord if you have things you'd like to see on the workshop show. So thank you, everyone, and